Hey everybody, Gurmy's Coaster Yard here, and today we are going to be starting a new Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 series on the channel. So, a little bit different from the last series we did, Germanator Studios. I decided this will be Germanator Gardens, and it will be more of a traditional amusement park. Somewhat still of a theme park, but it's not going to be such like a movie studio style park or whatever. I guess not that the last one entirely was. But another thing I'm doing differently in this series is I'm going to try and sort of present it in real time and more as a let's play slash tutorial type of world or type of series, and less of like time lapse based footage and things like that. So to start, every theme park or amusement park needs somewhere for the guests to start their experience, and that of course is the parking lot and main entrance. So that's what we're going to try to accomplish in today's episode. The first thing I usually do when I start a new Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 park though is switch the color of the grass. So this is kind of a yellowish green color, the default color, and I like to come sort of 3 to the right and 1 down. This texture here is just a little brighter, as you can see. So pretty much the first thing I usually do in any park is repaint the ground. So when I design amusement parks, usually the parking lot is an afterthought, and I end up with some small skimpy little thing at the front of the park. So I want to design my park with those kinds of things in mind from the get-go. That way we can kind of build the park around them. So to start, I'll turn on my grid texture here, and not only do I like to build parking lots, but if I can, or if I remember, I like to build the toll booth as well, and sort of the whole, everything that might be on the park's property. So that is what I'm doing now. Right now I'm kind of making the entry road, and my standard method of doing roads, I'm going to switch it to daytime real quick. That'll look nicer for all of you guys. But my standard way of doing roads is I like to make them 4 wide and put sidewalks on either side. And the reason for that is I like to use this asphalt texture here in the top left. And you'll notice if I just kind of paint that, it fades into the grass, which doesn't really look good. Most asphalt pavement, I would think, unless it's been abandoned for several years, would have a sharp edge to it. So one way you can solve that issue in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 is using textures that already have a sharp edge on the border, like the concrete texture here. So I will use that, and then you'll see when I paint asphalt down the middle here, it'll create a nice sharp edge, and the asphalt, of course, would be our sidewalk. So it works, and it makes things look a little more crisp, a little more thought out. So things like toll booths, it's a really good structure to start with in Roller Coaster Tycoon. But one thing you can do when you're designing a structure like this is just start with sort of the basic shape. So we'll come over here. In fact, if we are going to have 4 lanes exiting the toll booth, we should have 4 lanes entering the parking lot. So I'm going to increase this width a little bit, and keeping track of things like that early on in the building process can also help you sort of, I guess, plan out your build, and that way I don't build the parking or the toll booths in the wrong spot. Granted, you probably wouldn't have a 90-degree turn like that right after or before toll booths, but we're going to pick our battles here. So we're going to need a structure in the middle here with a window on each side, and then we're going to need to extend this. So this will actually be 5 lanes wide in total. And the reason for that, if you haven't figured it out quite yet, we're going to need our window. We'll use a door. That's kind of typical of toll booths, to have a door that the person stands in. So we'll have a door on each side here, like this, and then that way cars coming up this way can sort of reach out to the left, and cars coming through here can reach out to the right. So that is how we're going to do our toll booth. So already making mistakes, but hey, I'm not perfect. Nobody is. there is one thing that it is missing. That is a sign with the park's logo. So I realize now that I can't properly center the logo, which might be an issue unless, but look at that, Germanator Gardens. Now there's no missing where you are. In fact, let's put it right up there. So I may have to remake the signage to fit the different ratios of the signs, but for now, people now know where they are. That is that complete. We're just gonna finish off our sidewalk here. So now traffic coming in can go to the different lanes that are open. So I guess another small touch we could even add here. Let's see, let's use the scaffolding piece. If we paint it yellow, look, we can even add some little safety posts right outside here. If you know me in person, you know I'm big on safety. So there we go. Now those will help deter cars from hitting the toll booths. One thing I like about Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 is sort of the challenge of finding ways to use these pieces in ways they wouldn't otherwise be used or aren't intended. And using pieces like these posts, they are great for that kind of a purpose. We could even go maybe a step further with that with some of the diagonal pieces, but this is fine for now. Obviously the Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, like the entrance within the game itself, is right down here, but I kind of want to make this like a nice grand lead up to the park's entrance over here. I want to build off of my initial plans for Germanator Studios, and that was originally going to be, of course, the amusement park that we worked on, and then I was going to have at least one water park and a zoo. I still kind of want to do that with this park, but on a smaller scale, in the way that a Busch Gardens park would do it, maybe like Busch Gardens Tampa. Now let me be the first to admit I have never been to Busch Gardens Tampa, or any Busch Gardens park, so I'm basically just going off of what I know about these parks. It's clearly the name is Germanator Gardens is inspired by Busch Gardens, so I do definitely want to take on after that kind of style. So we're gonna have like different animal exhibits, ideally, of course, roller coasters, flat rides, probably some themed areas. Anyhow, let's talk a little more about designing parking lots, because that's something I do have experience with in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. And we did our fair share of parking lots as well in Germanator Studios. Most theme parks have large parking lots. I, of course, with Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 and in this normal sized world, there's limited space to do large parking lots. So I kind of like to have a decently sized parking lot to represent the size of the park, but not something that's going to eat into our space. So what we'll start with, I have the general direction that I'm building a lot back toward this entry road here. In fact, we'll even do an exit road somewhere over here to complement that. Anyhow, so you'll remember if you watched Germanator Enterprise or Germanator Studio series, I used the 1/3 height slate walls here from the colored wall set, and I sink them one tile into the ground, just like this. And if it's not clear what that is, it's a nice parking spot. But what you can do with this is, if I go down here to the custom structures tab, and I want to save this as a custom structure, I'll just highlight like this, and I can save that parking space. That way I can save myself a little time when building a parking lot. So we'll save this as parking space. When you're saving custom structures in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, make sure you get at least one tile around the outside of them to make sure they save properly. That will definitely help you avoid some issues. But then we'll go back to our custom structures tab, load it. These are all alphabetical, so we'll go down to P and parking space. There it is. And I already know I want, let's see, 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I want to have my parking spaces based in rows of 8. I can take it one step further, go back to my save custom, or my, I guess it's select objects is what it's listed as here. Back to the tab where I can create a custom structure and save my whole row of 8. We want to make a nice parking lot for everybody, so we'll leave a gap of 1 between these, and then we'll do a planter in between the rows, just like that. So another gap of 2, and a gap of 1, and so forth. And while I work on this, I think I'm going to speed up the footage again. Okay, and that will do it there. And then finally, we'll just put some more parking spots right along this side. So I don't remember if I actually touched base on this directly in the Germanator Studio series, but much like you can save your parking spaces as a custom structure, you can also save a line of cars. So that is what I plan on doing here. If you go to your scenery items in the vanilla scenery, scroll down, eventually you'll find the peep carrier car and the saloon car. Basically just turn them random directions, etc. Get the saloon car. Get the saloon car like that. And then of course, if you come down here with your custom paint tool, you can paint them different colors, save it, repeat it. The only issue with that is if you just kind of repeat it, then every car in like this line would be the same color. So you do have to put some effort into making it kind of randomized. You can even save multiple variations of that line of cars, etc. Another issue I considered with parking that we do want to tackle early on, because as soon as the parking lot ends, we're going to go straight into amenities and things that we want in our park. So we want to make sure the parking lot is sort of exactly as we want it early on. Another issue I thought of is that not everybody arrives by car. Some people will arrive by bus, whether it's large groups, etc. So we want to consider that here. I'm thinking just right along here, along this front edge. Bus parking, don't forget it, because whether they're school groups or marching bands or what have you, they've got to be able to enter the park. And just notice I left one gap of space between each bus. We like to err on the side of realism and make sure they have enough space to park the buses, etc. Okay, I'm gonna move on because the rest of this is straightforward enough. I think you guys can kind of get the gist of where I'm going with it. I decided I also wanted to add a little pickup and drop off area. And I decided it was worth showing because the way I kind of plan on doing it is maybe a little different. So in the same way that we sunk the 1/3 height walls into the ground to make lines, here you can see I've outlined yellow to make a little no parking zone, etc. Anyway, we can also take the thick slate slab. So we can take these here and make little things like that, sink those into the ground. And I colored it green. This is, like I said, it's going to be like a pick up and drop off. Maybe you're picking up or dropping off your teens from the park. Haha, that was a joke with the way things are going in the amusement industry right now. Yeah, pick up and drop off area, probably for like employees or just other groups, or maybe you want to drop off people who can't walk very far and then go park somewhere. So we're just going to add that a little bit. Now the reason you saw me sink down the terrain tile by one piece is if I just sunk this into the ground like I did with the others, you can see it kind of clips through the ground there. So where the 1/3 height walls are a tiny bit elevated, these are not. So to compensate for that, you just saw me sink down the ground a little bit. And look, it even looks like just painted asphalt. So I think it works just fine. Move on to the entrance for real this time. So of course we have our big parking lot here, but we're not just going to make the entrance to the park right here. we need to create space for guests to buy tickets. We need guest services, maybe a membership office if we want to have season pass sales. We need room for all that, plus outdoor amenities like restrooms. When I say outdoor, I mean outside of the park. But to start, we're going to have the pathway leading up to all that. Of course, once they leave the parking lot, they're going to need to sort of cycle or siphon or whatever their way onto this entry plaza pathway. So I'm going to use something nice. The sidewalk or the concrete works nicely as a sidewalk here. But we're going to do something a little bit nicer for our main entryway. So to start, I'm just going to have a nice uninterrupted pathway here, but of course I'll want to probably have some planters along here. I want to take a moment to talk a little bit about sort of the layout I have in mind for the park. So most of it is going to be our amusement park, the big space. Like I said, I think the zoological side of things will be kind of integrated into the park, but I still think I want to have it in its own designated area, kind of like Busch Gardens, Tampa. I know that you have Cheetah Hunt, which goes over the cheetah exhibit, etc. So it's integrated with the amusement park, but I still want to have the area with the animals sort of to be its own designated section of the park, with the rides integrated with that more than it's integrated into the rides as a whole. And then the water park, I think I want to have just in this area over here. You definitely don't need as much space for a water park in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3. But in Germanator Studios / Gardens fashion, and in my fictional line of amusement parks, one thing that I always have, it was even the inspiration for the Germanator Gardens logo, is a lion statue. The golden lion is at the front of every single park I build. So we're going to leave a little 1x1 tile for that guy over here. And then we're going to sort of branch off over here. Let's make room for 6 ticket windows. We can do a fountain behind the lion, or just a big water pool, whatever. And then we'll have space over here for restrooms and membership offices, and of course the main entrance right over here. So I think that'll work out pretty well. One of the lessons I learned with Germanator Studios is that when you're building a park, um, there are multiple levels of realism to which you can build it. So in my early days of playing Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, when I started doing realistic parks, um, I would kind of try and build it to the level of realism of what you can see when you're playing the game. So, making sure like roofs have air conditioner units, etc. Um, Eventually, I got a little ambitious and was like, you know what? I want it to be realistic down to the level of what the peeps can see. And some games can handle that. Evidently, as we learned with Germanator Studios, uh, Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 can to a point. Um, and generally speaking, with a standard sized park, I've never had any issues with that. But I have decided, and I'm going to do my best because this will be difficult for me. Oh, hey, it's the park inspector. Um, I want to cut back on sort of what the game needs and what my computer needs to be able to process this. So within reason, I'll still build walls in my buildings as I have here, but like we're not ever going to be in here and be able to see that this wall doesn't go all the way up to the ceiling. Maybe we will. I suppose if we really get in there, we can see it. But like if you're looking in the doorway here, that's not really a big concern. You can't see it. So basically, what I'm trying to say is I'm kind of going to try and change my approach for this series to design to what we will be able to see from a bird's eye perspective and not get too concerned about how buildings will look from the inside or what the peeps can see, because at the end of the day, sure, we can go into like the peep camera or the free look, I should say, and see what the peeps can see, but ultimately it's more important to have a park that functions, if that makes sense. So you know I'll put my air conditioning units on like normal and all that good stuff. Aside from that, yeah, we're gonna tone it back a little bit. I realize I've reached a little bit of a predicament here, because my fountain is centered with this path, but this all is a little off-center. We're just going to get right into it, and we'll go where the design takes us. Anyhow, so for my main entrance, of course, we'll probably have different themed lands, but I think I want to go with sort of a medieval theme for my park. So I was on the fence between like having a half timber style building or a castle style building, but I think to match the theme of these buildings here, we're kind of going to go the half timber route. So you may remember we built plenty of half timber buildings in Germanator Studios for, goodness, I can't even remember the name of the section now. That's crazy. It's been a while, and I have not been able to access that park since since I stopped being able to access it, really. So this is not the biggest of parks. It doesn't need the biggest of entrances. So I'm going to have the entrance in terms of the pathway just line up with the fountain here, but we're going to extend the building this way a little bit so it's a little more even on both sides. Anyway, so when building a half timber building, I always start with a stone foundation and then we'll move on to you know, the wooden layer. So this is sort of the bottom of the building itself, and then we'll do the actual like half timber building on top. Um, and that's pretty much my standard method for doing half timber. I talked about this in Germanator Studios, but it's I think it's good to sort of experiment with different block palettes and see how they work with one another. Half timber is not a style that's directly in the game. You do have medieval buildings, but beyond that, like you don't have half timber walls. If you want half timber, you have to make it. We'll start with a row of two, the double windows from the slate windows. So on the bottom layer here, I'm going to have the double windows, and on top I'm going to use single windows, and you'll see why in just a moment here. But basically, when you're doing half timber in Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, as you can see, this wall does not look very half timber, and that's because really the key element of the half timber style is being able to see the structural framework of the building from the outside. So half timber, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I suppose I should start with that. Half timber is really a European style. It has its roots in European uh, culture, I guess you could say. But it's, if you think of like stereotypical like German or like Swiss buildings, this is kind of what you would picture. And I think you'll start to understand what I'm talking about when I build this framework. One thing I guess I'll talk about really quick, I'll do a quick mini lesson here. So this is something I talked about in um, in in Germanator Studios, is the edges of a tile. In fact, I'm going to turn on my grid here. But let's say I have this tile, we're building on this tile. You'll notice I placed all of those red walls on the inside edge of that tile. So every square has an inside edge and an outside edge. So we have the red inside edge. I'm going to color this one, let's do it blue so it contrasts well. So you can also build a square on the outside edge here. And basically, you can use that to add additional depth to your builds. So most of the time I try to build on the inside edge. And the reason for that is because if I build a square on the outside edge, you'll see there's that little notch out of the corner where they don't quite line up. Normally, that's not, you want to avoid that. But you can use the edges, the inside versus outside edge, to your advantage, and that's what I do with the half timber buildings. So you'll see here, I will take my scaffolding piece here from the colored wall set and build it along the outside edge of this wall, and suddenly it's adding texture and depth to the building. And then up here where I have the single windows, I will get the wall girder piece and bring that up along the top edge. So typically with the single windows, I will use the girder, and with the double windows, I will use the scaffolding piece, just because that seems to be what the pairs that work best together. So you can see here already it looks more like a stereotypical half timber building, and we can continue that along the edges here, even though I'm not going to use these windows. And suddenly we have this nice grand building for our entrance, and of course I'll do it all the way along the back edge here as well. So just with that little bit, not only have we added additional depth and character to our build, but we've been able to replicate an architectural style that's not typically found in Roller Coaster Tycoon. And we can even take it a step further here. Let's go to our western town walls and get a get a 1/3 height wall and just build that up. Oops, I forgot to put in my scaffolding there. But just build that up along the edge. That way the scaffolding pieces look like they're resting on something. And it's okay to have that sort of wooden layer go out a little bit. And look at that. It's really not that complicated either, which is the beauty of it. Is you can sort of do a lot with a little here, and it does go a long way. So hopefully that makes enough sense to you guys. And of course, no building would be complete without a roof. So I'm gonna grab a roof here and recolor it to match the building, and then build it up along here. Now, perhaps the one disadvantage, I mentioned having the little notches out of the corners when you build on the outside edge. The other disadvantage is now that wood kind of pokes out here along this lip of the roof. Not ideal, but there's only really so much you can do with a technique in Roller Coaster Tycoon. I think personally it's a small price to pay for a really cool building technique, and it does go a long way. So finally, we'll just put in our path under here. One thing you'll notice I do too is I like to paint the ground under the paths, so you can see along here, basically right along this edge, you can still see the grass under this pathway. Really simple fix. I'll just come along here and get my irregular paving brush from the terrain painter. Look, I just paint the ground under that, and now we have a nice flush pavement up to the edge of our building here. But now we have this nice building and this nice entrance to our park. And of course, we need our logo. Now, I'm going to do a 2x2 sign again, but this time we can't really center it properly. I may try and sort of adjust it so we can make it work or whatever. But anyway, what I'm going to do here is just get rid of this edge here and place it along here. But before I do that, I'm going to paint the borders so it matches our style. Boom, just like that. And we'll do another one over here. I realize this logo is probably a bit big for the building, so I think I'm going to, between episodes, reformat the logo so I can have like a 1x2 that will fit a lot better, and it won't be so in your face or disruptive, and it'll even work better, I think, over at the toll booths. If I can have something a little smaller, maybe to put over each of these, we'll figure it out. If you guys have any suggestions for things we should build, or just any comments, suggestions, tips for me, you're welcome to leave them in the comments below. But for the most part, we may go through here and make a couple edits with things, but for the most part, that's going to do it for this episode. I will say, just because I'm sort of changing the format of this series compared to Germanator Studios, my uploads probably won't be as frequent, but you're going to get longer episodes out of them, and more detail, and because I'm doing this in real time, I think it will be easier to sort of engage with you guys and address any comments, etc. So yeah, that's going to do it for this episode, and I will see you guys all in the next episode of Germanator Gardens. Goodbye.